Welcome to episode 1 of the Peppermint Path. On today's show, we're going to be talking with a 78-year-old awesome guy that I met during a sign waving for a mayor campaign. When I heard his story, I was like, I got to share it. And not only did I want to share the video of his story, but this sparked the idea for the Peppermint Path show, where diabetics come to get a shot of encouragement, of stories, people who have type 1, type 2 diabetes, and how they have learned to thrive in their life and hit success the way they define it for themselves. To encourage you to keep going no matter what's happening around you, no matter how intense things are. Thank you for joining. Let's get right into it. Officially, hello and welcome to the Peppermint Path YouTube channel. The inaugural, the first show of the show. So, are you ready? Are you ready for?
I'm ready.
Are you ready for your presence to be shown around the world, around the globe on the YouTube once it goes live on there?
I don't want to show my ego.
Oh, Lego. Okay, well, let's begin. So welcome to the Peppermint Path show. The purpose of our show is to encourage diabetics by interviewing diabetics in their life, be it type 1, type 2, or even pre-diabetics. And so QB and we met at a sign waving. And actually, this is very fit that you and I are doing the very first show, because you are the reason why I started this show. And here's why. Yes. One day, so this book, The Peppermint Path, that I wrote, I didn't write, that I've published, this lady here in Hawaii, she wrote it over 34 years ago to encourage diabetics because she couldn't find anything in it. So she wrote the book. And then she stashed it away for 34 years in a wooden chest. And she always kept on mentioning it to me because I would help her. Yeah. And I helped her a lot on with coffee. And then she's finally started bringing this book up. And one thing led to another. I read it and I was just blown away how well it put me into the shoes of a diabetic. I got to understand and feel what a diabetic feels like. And she was type 1 diabetic. And I'm like, I have to publish this book. And so I published the book, I created a website, and then I was like, okay, there's that first piece of the puzzle. And internally, I felt like there's something more to be done. And that's where you come in, because I made the book. I made the first 50 book prints. And then I was like, okay, it's good to have a book. It's nice to sell it, but it's not going to have the kind of worldwide impact that I would love to have. And the kind of impact that I feel that's my journey right now, is to leave this impact on diabetics around the world. And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to create a website. Then I'm like, okay, the book is what I'll sell. Then I created the audiobook, the ebook, and a video book, which you can go on YouTube and listen to it for free to actually get the message out there, get the story out there. And then I was like, there's something missing. Then one day when we actually had the conversation about your health journey, which we're going to dive into, I was like, that's what's missing, is sharing these stories. And so while we were sign waving for a gentleman who was campaigning for mayor, who did end up winning, which is awesome to be on a winning team, QB planted the seed into my mind. And it's been a few months since we initially had that conversation. And that's how we met, and that's how we connected. And that's why we are here today. And so always remember, as the show grows, you are the very person who planted that seed to make it happen. So
thank you.
That being said, one of the first things I'd like to do is to get a foundation for people who are listening, and to give some kind of context about yourself, who you are. And one of the big questions to answer is, how do you define success for yourself? Because on this podcast, there's going to be a lot of different people coming on from all strata of society. And what success is for me is different than what is for you. And so diabetics, I read, which is an interesting statistic, that 30% of diabetics fall into depression because of their diabetes. And so it is nice to share stories. Like my hairstylist, he's a hairstylist. He loves what he's doing. And for him, that's success, is being the best at what he does while trying to live with this disease. He has type 2 diabetes, and making the best of his life. And so for you, for the first question is, how do you define success for yourself?
Well, that's a question that I kind of like to look at it from a couple different angles, because my first angle of how I found out that I was successful was just by talking to people and understanding what their problems and situations were. But my grandmother was an astrologist, and she was also a Christian in the Freemason. I think they call that, I forget what they call the female group. But when I was 4 years old, I heard her talking about me to some of her friends about my astrology chart. And she mentioned to them that I was going to be a preacher. And the fact is, I was sitting in the corner thinking, shaking my head, no, Grandma, I don't know what you've been smoking. And I didn't know nothing about weed at the time. You know, I said, but I ain't going to be no preacher. What happened is I got into the work world. Actually, as I was graduating from high school, I began to realize that I was preaching, because I was actually sharing my thoughts with people on what I thought, looking for answers to see if I was thinking the correct way. But the key answer to how do you find out if you're successful is to just jump in and do what you need to do, and be able to ask people the questions as to, what do you think? Because a lot of people don't like to answer that question, ask that question, because they don't want to know what nobody else thinks. They just want you to know that I am me. So my short answer to that is that most people should do their astrology chart to find out who all the different characters are in their play. And each one of the planets in an astrology chart is a different character. And I don't believe in death. I believe that we circle and we go through different cycles of life, and we learn from our previous lifetimes, plus getting new adventures in our new lifetime. And what that basically does, it brings the karma from what you didn't resolve in the last lifetime. And then it takes you into the present time, where you can actually pay attention to what you're doing and who you are, and pay attention to how many people support you, to see, asking you questions to see if they can get the answers that they need, or at least be able to trigger their brains. So I think that's the key to success, is to pay attention to yourself.
And how do you define success for yourself?
Well, that's a long story. Like I said, I found out who I was when I was a young kid, but I didn't really understand who I was. I just knew that I was a leader. And I say that because when I was in high school, in kindergarten, all the kids used to kind of follow me because I was the class clown. But I didn't understand that, you know. But I was the only black kid in the class, but I was attracting all the white kids, you know, who basically thought I was a funny guy. So
what it sounds like
I don't
is
know, that's a personal thing.
If I'm hearing you right, for you, success, it's not so much as achieving something, but it's sharing these ideas to help others. So no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're achieving, that's just life. But for you, what success is, helping people, just elevating their consciousness or their state of mind, their state of being.
Yes.
Awesome.
And one of the things that I found out growing up is that when people talk and have communications with each other, they're a little sensitive about saying some of the things that they're thinking, because they really don't want to make anybody mad when they're talking. But at the same time, they are shutting themselves off, and it's kind of like there's no facts to what they're talking about. It's just like we're just talking just to be friends, you know. But when you get into what you call serious discussions, then you have to pay attention to the body language. You have to pay attention to how the answers come back to you when you're talking. And it's always best to basically take a look at what are you talking about at this particular time, and try to stay to the subject, because when most people are communicating, they jump all over the place. And a lot of times that's for the purpose of avoiding what you're asking.
Yes.
I learned that
It's very
So,
interesting.
yeah.
It's very interesting when you start noticing that somebody asks you a question and you're like in your head, you're like, oh man, I'm not even answering the question. I'm avoiding, and they're like, okay, let me get back to it. And then you start seeing that in other people. So it's like almost a defensive mechanism that we have inside of us to protect the hidden part of ourselves that we want to keep hidden ourselves. So I
But I
wanted
didn't
to.
catch on to that until I got older.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
You
and here
know,
you are just
I was
sharing
like
it.
everybody else. Yeah. And then when I realized body language is really a key to communicating with somebody else, because really what that's also doing, it's connecting the collective consciousness, which we
Mhm.
all have the ability to do. It's just that when you get to the question of diabetes, this connects because once your pineal gland starts dying, it starts affecting your brain, which is type 3 diabetes. And type 3 diabetes actually starts shutting down your ability to think and
Wow.
to concentrate and to
So
focus.
before
So
we get into
diabetes has a huge.
wow, you're definitely. I want to get into that, but before we dive into diabetes, can you give us a little brief history about yourself? Because when I read what you sent me, I was like, holy moly, that is one heck of a life. So if you can, in a nutshell, share some of those points with us, so that listeners can be understand who you are and what history you have. It's quite amazing.
Well, you don't you don't have a long enough program for me to go through everything that I've done in this life and everything that I've
Do your best in a
accomplished.
nutshell.
So, and well, I don't know where to start when you talk about that, because it actually started when I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, when I was a kid, and my mom she was only 16 years old when she had me, so I really didn't have the guardian parents growing up because I never knew my dad. But my mother's sister actually stepped in, who was older, to help raise me in Indianapolis, Indiana, because my grandfather he was in the military during the segregation period at the time, 1942. And when he came out of the military, he's the one that basically connected me to the extended family. And I was raised by the extended family. So that's important to who I am right now, because at the same time, when I was born, my name was changed. Now you call me Cutie, but my real name is QB, and it's spelled Cubie.
Mhm.
But what happened is that blacks weren't allowed into the public facilities in 1942. So somebody at the government agency changed the first letter in my name to H, Hubie. And that's been a problem for me to get straightened out, because nobody could read and write at the time that I was born. So they didn't know that my name was changed to Hubie. I've always been known as QB. And as a result of that, I'm still dealing with that today, because I can't even travel off the island, because Tennessee won't accept my name change from California, when I had to get my Social Security to the correct spelling of my name, which is Cubie, Cubie. Now,
Oh.
there are some things that I learned about myself when I did my astrology chart, was that in my numerology chart, my first name is a 22. My second name, Lee, my middle name, Lee, is a 22. My last name, Maddox, has two D's in it, and each D represents a 22. And so does M, represents a 22 in the area of reducing to the numbers. And what that basically meant was that I was a master in a previous lifetime, and I came to this lifetime for the purpose of helping humanity. And I have 5 planets in the 11th house of Aquarius, meaning that I was an advanced Aquarian when I came into this world.
Mhm.
Now, I'm telling you this because it leads into my experiences when I was living in the Redwoods up in California and dying from 3 different diseases, what this is all about. And I learned how to listen in nature, and I could actually hear my spiritual guides telling me what to do. And that's how I really got well in a nutshell.
Okay. So when
But when you
let's
get into it, I'll explain that.
well, let's dive right into this into the health world of health for you. When did you first find out that you had diabetes?
I was an international representative for the United Auto Workers in Michigan.
Mhm.
And I got that position, appointed to that position, because I was the first Black person during the Martin Luther King days that ended up getting an apprenticeship in the skilled trades department at a plant where I was working at.
Mhm.
And I was the only Black person in there until the plant even closed. And I got my journeyman's card, and I ran for the chair of the committeeman to represent all the skilled trades workers.
Mhm.
Because the guy I was running against wasn't doing his job, I lost when I ran against him by 3 votes. But then what happened after he won, we got together in a group, all of them got together, and they told him in front of me, I'm standing there, it must have been about 50 of us. They said, John, if you don't do your job this time around, we're going to put a nigger in your place. And they was talking about me.
Uh-huh.
So John laughed at him. And 2 years later, he hadn't done his job. So I ran against him again, and I won by 23 votes.
No, that's
In the meantime, John became my top lieutenant because he knew he didn't have the help to do what he was supposed to do. So he was helping me.
Okay.
He ended up as my first lieutenant.
Mhm.
So then I was asked to nominate my assistant director, the director of our region, for vice president.
Mhm.
He happened to be a racist, but I didn't know this until we got to California, and he sent me a message asking me to nominate him the next day in front of the delegates in Los Angeles, California, where we had over 10,000 people in that arena. This is how I got recognized. So what happened, basically, I gave a speech and I got a standing ovation from everybody there, including my brothers, Black brothers. But what happened is that when I got back home, my vice president asked me, "What did you do out there in California, man? Everybody said you was in bed with the white folks." I said, "Hey, I don't know what you mean." He said, "Well, Owen Beaver, he was the director. He's a racist." I said, "Well, didn't nobody tell me that?" I said, "Besides, I work with these guys, so
yeah,
I know how to deal with it." So about 8 weeks later, I get a call from the assistant director, and he asked me to come over to his office on a Friday because Owen got to be the vice president. And I goes into his office, and he looks at me and he says, "If I catch you over there in bed with them niggas in Detroit, I'm gonna cut your balls out." And I just looked at him and says, "Okay, I don't even know what I'm doing there." That was on a Friday. I was making $45,000 a year. So then he says, "I want you to be loyal to me." And I says, "Okay." What happened after that was he gave me the job. I started on Monday at $100,000 a year. Then they overloaded me with all the other guys with all the bad facilities that were failing. And I saved 90% of them and kept them going. So that's when I ended up serving on boards, on different boards and everything, because I had plenty of time to do what I needed to do, because I was teaching all my committeemen and all my facilities how to represent themselves. And if they called me, then I'm going to solve it my way. And they didn't like that because they knew that I might give them something and then take away something in order to get an agreement between them and the management. So they were solving their own problems.
Yep. Wow.
So I had lots of time to do different things. I got into art, which you see a piece of my artwork back here. And I'm not really sure what the question was, because I'm rambling now.
Yeah, well, the question was, when did you find out about having diabetes? And you said that you had these experiences. And so these experiences, you're bringing them up.
Yes. I was on my way home from a meeting, going to Grand Rapids, is where our office was. And I started feeling like I was fainting. So I pulled over on the side of the road and I just rested there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then I drove home, which is about 10 miles away, and I called my secretary and told her that I had just passed out, and she told me to go to the hospital. So I called my doctor at the hospital and told him what happened, and he told me to get there right away. That was when I was diagnosed with diabetes. See, because one of the things that, about diabetes is that if you don't have enough energy in your system, because your system doesn't digest sugar when you have diabetes, one of the things that you'll do is you'll be fainting and you'll sleep a lot and you go to the bathroom a lot. I was doing all that. So then when I ended up in the hospital, we had a staff doctor there. So I was able to talk to him the way I wanted to talk to him. And I asked him, he was telling me, you got diabetes. So I was discussing it with him. I says, well, what causes that? He says, sugar. Sugar and different foods that turn into sugar, like gluten and the things. I don't know if gluten turns into sugar, but it's in a lot of the pastries and a lot of the flours and the biscuits and all that kind of stuff that you eat, which turns to sugar when you put it into your system. So that was when I learned about diabetes. I had to stay in the hospital for about a week, and then they let me out. And then that's when I started doing my research on diabetes.
To capture that moment, if you could recall to your best ability, what was it like for you in that moment? Like, if you put yourself back in those shoes, what was going through your mind? Like, hey, you have diabetes, you're fainting, you want to sleep, you're going to the bathroom a lot, and then somebody says, you got diabetes now. What was that emotional state like for you? What was that feeling for you like?
That's one of the biggest problems. That's one of the biggest problems with the medical profession. If you don't ask the questions, they don't give you no answers. And I didn't know what kind of questions to ask, except for I didn't even really know what diabetes was, except for there were members of my family that had diabetes and had died from it. So I was aware that it was a killer. So I had to start doing my research on it. And that's when I started learning about diabetes. And I didn't solve my diabetes problem right away, but I got my sugar down to the lower levels because they had me on insulin and they had me checking my blood pressure with the sticker in the finger. So that's how I was controlling my diabetes at the time, but I was only controlling it. I wasn't getting rid of it. And that's why you got me on this program, is to find out how I got rid of it.
What kind of diabetes did you get?
I'll wait for you.
Yeah, we'll definitely get
it. It was
there.
type 2.
Type 2 diabetes?
Type 2 diabetes. That's normal. That's the normal type of diabetes that people get that they cause for themselves. Type 1 diabetes is what people are born with that diabetes. So that's a little different than the average type of diabetes, because that usually lasts a lifetime. And I can't really talk about that because I didn't work on myself about that. But I'm sure that my procedures of what I did will work. And then type 3 diabetes, most people never heard of. But
I haven't heard about it.
President by the name of Ronald Reagan. Well, Ronald Reagan was the jelly bean king. And he ended up, when he died, he had dementia. And dementia is a form of type 3 diabetes. And people don't know that. See, because that goes from the type 2 diabetes, it goes to the next step to type 3 diabetes when you don't correct it. And then when you lose your brain, my mom died from that. And what basically happens is that your mind doesn't work well. And I think I mentioned this earlier before, is that it starts killing different parts of your brain and parts of your mind when you've got too much sugar in your system.
So from the moment...
And the pancreas is...
Oh, sorry. I guess our videos are a little unsynced, so I think I just cut you off.
No, I just said the pancreas is a little thing in your body. It works like this. But when you get diabetes, it starts doing this. And then it stops. Okay. And that's when you elevate your diabetes up into the type 3 level, and you don't have much longer to go if you don't change your habits.
Okay. So it slows down.
Everything can be reversed.
Okay. Yeah. So from the moment that
I'll tell you how to fix it.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there, definitely. So the next thing I wanted to capture before we really dive into that is, from the moment that you got diagnosed and as your journey is unfolding there before you go out into the mountains, what are some of the things you wish you knew on your journey with diabetes?
Well, after I was diagnosed with diabetes, I knew what the problem was. But here was the problem with me. As an international representative, we had lots of meetings with the attorneys on the other side of the table, and we would always go and meet at a bar, and we would have 3 martinis. That would relax all of us to the point where you could make a mistake and give up something you didn't want to give up. You know? And so I learned about that, and I started drinking Coca-Cola. Now, the Coca-Cola was a no-no, but I didn't want to drink the alcohol because the Coca-Cola had too much sugar in it. But I kept myself normal, and I was able to be visible as to what was going on. And the reason I'm explaining this to you is because we were all on expense accounts. And being on the expense account, we would always fight over the bill. And when you're fighting over the bill, that means you eat as much and drink as much as you can drink. And then you get that bill and use that for your tax write-off. So that was the funny thing about it. But the deal was I was weighing about almost 200 pounds at the time because we had meetings like this all the time, you know, where we were drinking and eating food. It was kind of like this is how we socialize with each other while we're fighting each other.
Yep. Duking it out.
And, you know, if you can make the opponent, if you can make the opponent weaker, that means you can win more, see? So I learned that early because my mind was working great. But back to Ronald Reagan, when he died with dementia, and I don't think anybody in the country knew that was type 3 diabetes. But what connected with me was that he was always eating them jelly beans. He was a jelly bean king. So
to
that's how I learned about that.
To summarize, what's one thing you wish you had known during that time of after learning about diabetes? What's one thing you wish you knew during that period?
Discipline. I know it now. Yes. That's the number one rule. You have to discipline yourself on what you eat and when you're eating it.
Okay.
And that's a tough thing to do.
What helped you the most on your journey with diabetes before your healing time? When you were in the life of diabetes, what helped you the most there?
Well, nothing until I retired and moved to San Jose. And I thought I had my diabetes kind of under control because I was pricking my finger and it was within the different areas and everything. But what basically happened was that I got really active in my retirement stage, hanging out at the library and studying the homeless people and helping the homeless people in the area. So what basically was going on is that I was going to the coffee shop all the time and drinking this coffee that had, I forget, it's not coffee, but it's kind of like a little thing. I forget what they call it.
Espresso?
But it's really strong. And espresso. I was drinking that almost every night.
Okay.
So then what happened, I ended up going to the hospital. And not only was I diagnosed with the diabetes, I was diagnosed with the heart disease, and I was diagnosed with the cancer, the prostate cancer that I had. And that's basically what turned me around.
Ooh, now let's dive right into that. So you got that, you got all these diagnoses and that turnaround moment. What was the turnaround moment for you?
Well, I started thinking about my health then. I wasn't thinking about my health before. I thought, okay, I don't know much. Nobody teaches good health. That's one of the problems in this country. The FDA should be teaching people about good health instead of getting us all on prescription drugs. See, because I ended up on 13 prescription drugs after I was diagnosed with all these different things all happening to me all at once. And that's when I decided to move up into the Redwoods, which I was guided by my angels because I didn't know, if I could find a place. But I was in this place and I was looking in the paper and I saw this cabin that was for rent. And the first thing that entered my mind, oh, that's too nice to be still there. But something told me, call him. So I give the guy a call. The guy says, you don't grow ganja, do you? I said, what's that? He says, marijuana. I said, oh, no, I don't grow it, but I do a little bit of it every now and then. He said, okay, come on up. So when I went up there, that's when I had the full report on all 3 of my diseases. And I went up there to die. But what happened was I turned over my car on a cliff, and it was about this far from the cliff where we was a mile up from the bottom, but it didn't go over. Ooh. So I got out and scratched my head and said, damn, what happened? When the police came, they looked and seen, they said, a few more minutes, we wouldn't have found you. So I'm thinking, like, I looked over there and I said, wow. So I went home that night and I started meditating, and I asked God, why did you take my car? He says, because you said you want to get well, and you're driving every day down to Santa Cruz and to San Jose. That's why I took your car. And that was when I started walking up into the mountains every day. And I started hearing everything to do. And one day it told me to get a juicer. I didn't know what the hell a juicer was. So I went online and I found this guy named Jack LaLanne. Jack LaLanne had swam the English Channel, and he had pulled 2 boats swimming to Alcatraz from San Francisco. And he was training the police and the fire department how to be healthy and keep themselves healthy. So I went down to Santa Cruz and I went to Costco's and I got me a Jack LaLanne juicer. On my way back home, I see all these beautiful fresh fruit stands and vegetable stands, and all you had to do was put the money in the can and take what you want. Yeah. So I started juicing, and I was juicing beet leaves, carrots, green apples, celery, and a couple other things. My blood pressure started going up. My blood sugar started going up. So then I went back online. I found out that the beets had too much sugar in them, and the carrots have a lot of sugar in them. So I cut the beets off and juiced the leaves, because it says the leaves will cleanse out your kidneys and your liver. So I started doing that, and I was drinking a pint a day. Wasn't hungry no more. Didn't eat no food because wasn't hungry. The juicing has all the vitamins and minerals in it that you know. What I did with the carrots, even though they had sugar in them, I cut down on them and used half the carrots of what I was using before, which is not enough sugar. It wasn't too much sugar to cause me a problem. But what basically was happening was that my liver was cleansing out, my kidneys were cleansing out, because I kept going to the bathroom and didn't know where the stuff was coming from because I wasn't eating anything. Come to find out, this was all stuff that was stored up inside of my system that I had been eating all my life. Oh, wow. And that's what when people get heavy and fat, it's from the inside. It's the gluten and the flour. People don't know, they forgot about paper mache. When they taught us about how to use paper mache back in school, it was water and flour, and it would get hard as a brick. Same thing happens inside of your body. And that's where people get what they call leaky gut, where the bacteria, the bad bacteria in your system, actually makes its home out of the flour and the water that you're eating. And it eats right through the stomach and gets into your bloodstream. And that's where all the different diseases start in your body. Oh, wow. And I had to learn this the hard way. Yeah. So that's why I'm interested in teaching people.
So now that you've shared that story, that was where you had, these are the things you wish you knew, and you did get to know, luckily, thankfully, that here we are talking about it. What are some of the things you'd like to share to inspire pre-diabetics or diabetics to take their health a lot more seriously?
Well, first of all, they got to want to be well. They got to want to get well. Because you see, it took a long time to get there, and it's not going to be easy and quick to get back to where you're supposed to be. That's what people need to understand. But with the discipline, and that's my number one thing I tell people, focus is the number 2, and moderation is number 3. And I'm going to come back to moderation because when I first got diabetes, I learned that word from my doctor. And he was in an argument. I asked him about, could I do honey? and he said he had just gotten back from Canada, and they had did a research there, and they found out that honey works in moderate. Honey's okay if you do it in moderation. But what he didn't tell me was that moderation will kill you. See, because if you do a little marijuana and you get the munchies, guess what? You're going to eat any damn thing that chops up in front of you. And if it's got sugar in it, you don't care. You're going to eat it. And that's what the word of moderation means, because people have their own definition of what moderation is. And moderation basically means do a little bit, doesn't matter when you do it, don't do it all the time.
Okay.
That's what the definition of moderation is. Discipline means focusing on what you need to do every day before you get up. And don't deter from that. So if you're going to juice, go do your juicing. I have a tonic that I make now out of coconut water, which is awesome. That's actually reversing my aging process. And unfortunately, coconut water is not available to everybody unless you live in Hawaii. But I have a buddy who cleans coconut trees, and he sells the coconuts to Island Naturals and all different people. And people buy them, but they don't really understand the value of it, because the coconut water is alkaline. See, and alkaline stops cancer from growing in your system, the alkaline body. But that's also true with some of the things you put in the juicing, like the celery, green peppers, cayenne pepper. It helps cleanse out your arteries to repair your brain. I eat cayenne peppers and jalapeno peppers 2-3 times a day. And if you don't want to eat them, you can buy them in capsule form. And they have one that's 100 UP. I forget to call it 100 units. And then they have one that's 80 units. But the key to that is taking a tablespoon of olive oil and apple cider. And then you take the tablets, because the tablets will not only cleanse out your arteries so that your blood flows better, it also repairs the stomach by building a mucus over the body where the bad bacteria has eaten holes in your body. That's called leaky gut, by the way. And that repairs the stomach, the cayenne pepper does. So I do my research. The research is the key. If you want to know what you're doing and what you're taking, you go online, you can find everything. Ain't nothing hidden. You just type in cayenne benefits. It'll bring you to that site. It'll tell you everything you need to know. And that's how people need to understand that before they take anybody's advice on what they're doing, because then they can see exactly what they're doing to themselves. And I haven't been to a doctor since 2012. And the last time I went to the doctor was in Waimea. It was 4 doctors came in to look at my report after about a week of evaluation. They couldn't find nothing in my system that I had. And then they started asking me, what was I doing? And then you know what I said? I said, guys, I says, I'm looking at all these nurses coming out here, and I'm sitting there waiting on you guys, and they look like they sicker than the patients. I said, y'all need to let me, and you guys sitting over there with your bellies hanging all over you, y'all should let me come up here and teach y'all. And one of them blurted out, oh, the pharmaceutical companies wouldn't like that. And they all pointed at it. You weren't supposed to say that. All 3 of them at the same time. That verified that their job was to sell those drugs that the FDA was recommending for people to take. So that pretty much, that's my story.
Wow.
I don't know what else you want to know.
I think that's very, very, very powerful to hear that you can live a very successful life looking from the outside. You got the stuff, you got the job, you got the money, and then the health all of a sudden really takes precedence, or takes the forward seat, and you're like, oh boy, now you got diabetes, you're fainting, you're having these experiences, heart cancer, all these things. And then through some interesting events, like your car, you're listening to your gut, listening to like, okay, go do this, and you're following these, and then you put some heavy research into it, wholly expecting to come to a touchdown in life. All of a sudden you realize that you start doing things differently. You're doing more research. So it sounds like research was one of the huge things for you, and
meditation
meditation. So
and nature, because that's when you can hear the spiritual guides talking to you. See, people don't believe in anything other than just us humans here. No, there are more intelligent beings than us. But when you get out in nature, you can actually hear and talk to the different creatures. You know, I had a rattlesnake go across in front of me one morning and said, "Good morning, QB." I was scared shitless of rattlesnakes because in Michigan, man, you didn't want to mess with them.
yeah.
I just kept walking up the mountain. I said, "Good morning," and he just went on about his business. And I had butterflies flying around my head, telling me different things. I had hummingbirds doing this. I had ravens landing on my roof. They were all talking to me. I had flowers growing. A different flower would go in the same place every day just to see if it had my attention.
Wow.
You know, and then that's when they told me to get a juicer. But you see, meditation in a quiet place is really key, because what's affecting us in the normal society is all the electricity wires that they're putting in the system, and you can't hear nothing. See, but when you get out in nature, Hawaii is a perfect place for this. You can just sit there for 10 or 15, 20 minutes, and all of a sudden, boom, something's talking to you, telling you what to do.
So get into
every
the
morning
silence.
when I get up, I ask myself, yes, every night before I go to bed, I ask a question. As soon as I wake up in the morning, I got the answer.
Awesome.
Now that's what I learned about the spiritual world.
So tap into the power of.
And that's all coming out right now. There's a lot of people talking about this now.
Awesome.
You know, the wake up is actually taking place. But I was able to find it after I started juicing and cleansing out my system and living in nature. I started hearing what I needed to hear. And I didn't have to talk. I just think, and the answer would come.
So
now, where it's coming from, I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where from.
Skills. We all have.
Awesome.
Yes.
So you heard it right here, ladies and gentlemen. Tap into that inner guidance system coming from you can call it's coming from out or in. It doesn't matter. Just slow down, go to nature, and start focusing. Just start connecting with that, because as your story inspiring that it pushed you to do that research. Yes, then it tells you what to do. Now you got to go do it, and what you did, you learned what things to juice, what not, actually doing that. And here you are in Hawaii. Here we are. We met here, and thank you very much for sharing that story. And as we're coming in for the touchdown on this podcast today and this show, I would like to do something with you. I'm gonna ask you 4 questions, and then I'm gonna say 4 things. So the first 4, I'm gonna ask you 4 questions, and you just answer with 1 word. What is your favorite?
Oh, okay.
Yes. What is your favorite food?
Cayenne peppers.
Nice. Favorite book?
That's a series of books. It's called The Archurians.
Okay. Awesome. Favorite song?
That's one.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, well, I've got the favorite song now. Wow. I got so many favorite songs. I'm a music lover. Let's see. I like jazz.
Okay, well, that's good enough. And for the 4th one is
country.
Okay, but I'll hold on to your first one, jazz. Now, your favorite place to where's your favorite place?
I love it here in Hawaii.
Awesome. And so this last part is I'm going to say one. Oh, so the last thing I want to do here is I'm going to say 4 words, and then whatever comes to your mind first, just say it. Okay? You ready? You got the rules? So I'm going to say a word, and whatever comes to your mind, just share it. So the first word is health.
Good.
Happiness.
I am happy. Two words.
Progress.
Get up.
Woo! And for the final one, success.
Focus.
Ooh, awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here on the Peppermint Path Show, where diabetics come to get a shot of encouragement. Thank you very much for joining us today, and join us for our next round. And any final words, QB, today?
I got one more thing.
Go for it.
Yes. My first diagnosis of diabetes was when I was 57 years old.
57.
I'm 78. I'm 78 now. I wasn't
Wow.
supposed to live past 3 years.
Holy moly, boy, am I glad you did. That is awesome.
So thank you for having me, bro.
QB, thank you very much. I really appreciate this, and we'll be seeing each other around definitely. You know, it's a pleasure to spend this
Okay.
time and to get to meet you and get to know you as a human being. So thank you very much.
Nice
and
meeting you, bro.
until next
You're
time,
welcome.
ladies and gentlemen.